Hey guys, welcome back to Medical Coding with Blue. Today's topic is all about promoting communication in the workplace with your providers and with other coders. But first, I'm going to do a little catch up. So I know I said I was going to talk about the coder awards and who won what. However, there was a little slight change in plans. So I could not, I was going to give them out individually to each provider, right? And just do it one-on-one, that kind of thing, no big deal. But my most favoritist PA requested that this be done in a group. She would really prefer it to be done in a group because she wants everybody around and they all want to share in the experience. This is a common theme among them. They like to know who is what, who got what. So I was like, okay, I will wait then. We will wait until everybody can get together and then we will do the awards then. But I am very excited because I have them in the frames and they look freaking amazing. I love the way that they came out. And this is just something that is very small. It's a small gesture, but it means a lot, okay? Which ties into my whole communication thing for today. So this took literally like more thought energy than anything else. I had cardstock that I had, and I printed out these certificates that were free online. There's a free certificate generator, and you can personalize it, you can customize it to anything you want to, which I thought was really awesome. So I'm not going to say the categories, but I can say one category, which is best documentation. And because there's several different categories I have. And you can just put the person's name on it, and then you can put like, thank you, or however you want to word it. And I don't quite want to talk about how I worded it just yet until I give them out, so then I'll show you guys. But it is awesome. It is a very good way to promote communication, and it is all about just getting that good relationship going. It is talking to each other. It is about saying what's going on. I had a viewer comment that isn't it dangerous when a coder does not communicate with their provider? Absolutely. If a coder does not communicate with their provider, be it for whatever reason, they're too scared to talk to them, they are very shy, anything that is preventing you from talking to your provider is very dangerous because number one, if you're not querying them like you're supposed to, you don't know all of the information that you should in order to make the most pinpoint diagnosis selection that you possibly can. That's number one. Number two, do you even know if you're capturing everything that they're absolutely doing? It is one thing to see the documentation on paper. It is another to go and talk to them and find out exactly what is going on. Because sometimes when they're talking, stuff just comes out and then you're like, well, I don't recall seeing this in your documentation. Oh, well, I don't do that because we're not going to get credit for it anyway. Well, who told you that? Well, at another facility. No. No. You have to tell me what's going on because the caliber of the coder is not going to be the same everywhere you go. And some people don't communicate. Some people overly communicate, although how can you overly communicate? But I guess it would be possible. But you want to get into a good relationship where you're telling each other what's going on. If there is an update to coding, if there is a update to the guidelines, if there is a update to some policy at your hospital or to an insurance company, you need to let the provider know this is something that is truly important because they're thinking they're doing things one way and then the coding and everything else is going another way. Okay? And so that's where we need to make sure that it's always, the communication lines are always there. They need to know that you're going to communicate with them effectively. Now, I was guilty of this in the beginning. I was painfully shy. And of course, I'm sure, as many of you already know, because I've talked about Dr. X several times, Dr. X was very, very, very instrumental in getting me to communicate because I didn't think that it was a big deal before. I didn't think that providers wanted anything to listen to anything that I had to say, because they're providers. They've been to medical school. Why do they need to listen to me? That was my thought process. And then he's like, no, you're the medical coder. I don't know anything about medical coding. I'm not a medical coder. I am a surgeon. And I need to know if I'm doing everything that you need in order for me to get whatever credit that I'm able to get. And I said, okay. So it was all a matter of one person speaking up and saying, I need this, but truth be told, we had a mediator that did this. So if you haven't heard the story, okay, here's the story. So I used to work in an ancillary building, right? It was away from the hospital. We were not in the hospital. I did not see the providers. I did not know them. And they had just always kept us away. They always housed us away. And I had a partner at the time, and she had met a lot of the providers already. She had known them for years. She had been in the hospital for a good 15 years before I came along. And I, being there and working in this ancillary building away from people, the only way that I knew them was by name on a paper, and that was it. I had occasionally sent them an email. Any of my docs, I had occasionally sent them an email and said, hey, this was really awesome, or hey, I have a question, there's this query, and I would give them the formal query. And so it was just like, okay, so that was the only time I had any communication with them. And sometimes I would hear back from some providers, and sometimes I wouldn't. Again, that all fed into my thought process of, okay, well, they just don't want to communicate with me, so I'll just be quiet and I'll do my job and I'll just go home. And so fast forward a few years later, we got moved into this new hospital, this new facility, and the hospital administrators wanted to make sure that the medical coders were embedded in the clinics. This was going to be able to promote more communication between the coder and the provider to make sure that everything was going to be in line with what was going on, and the proper diagnosis and proper procedures and proper evaluation and management levels were going to be picked up. Okay, cool. Sounds great, right? In theory. So again, I'm still having this thought process going on. And one of the administrators from the hospital, he was walking around, and his job is to promote communication. That's his total job. I tease him about his job, but his job is to communicate and talk. And he is like a liaison between nurse and provider and coder. That is, and provider and administrator. I mean, he goes all the way down the line. If there's anybody that needs to have a mediator as a go-between, it's going to be him. So I being in this new facility, and we're just plugging along and everything's going great. And he comes in one day and he says, hi, he goes, are you guys the medical coders? And we're like, yeah. He's like, I'm looking for the coder for Dr. X. Now, I always refer to him as Dr. X for his privacy. And so that way, it's just to protect him. So I've always called him Dr. X on my show here. So I said, he goes, well, who is the coder for Dr. X? And I said, well, that would be me. And he's like, oh, well, I just had a conversation with him, and he said that you don't communicate with him. And I said, what? He's like, yeah, he said that you don't communicate with him. He would like more communication with this coder. And I was like, what? And I say, I always, I ask him if he has any questions on email, and he says no. And he says, well, no, he says that, he would just like some more feedback from you. And I'm mad at this point. I'm mad because I had asked him in this email if he had any questions to let me know. I was offended because he was telling somebody that my communication skills were bad. All I could think of was me. Okay? And I will show you guys some leadership books that I have gotten from the Arbinger Institute that I would love for you guys to see if you can check out and read, because these are really awesome and they really did help me to transform my way of thinking. Okay, but getting back to the story. So I said, okay, well, he goes, well, if you could just go over and talk to him. I was like, you know what? I'm going to take care of this right now. You know what I mean? Because I'm mad at this point, And it is not the guy's fault, the liaison. It wasn't his fault. It was the fact that maybe I had, in my mind, I had failed, and I needed to get this straightened out. And I felt like all he had to do was just say, hey, yes, I do need help, or hey, yes, I do have a question. Okay, but it doesn't work that way. Okay, that is in the perfect world. That does not, it does not always work that way. So I learned that day. So I went over, and I left my office, and I went over to his office, and I knocked on the door, and he turns around. He's got this big smile on his face, and he says, hi. And I said, hi. I said, so I heard from a little birdie that you have a problem with my communication skills. He's like, well, no, and I said, okay, because I seem to recall that I did send you an email like occasionally when you were doing good, but I mean, I, I don't have any issues with your documentation. Your documentation is always so good. And he's like, well, no, I just wanted to know, like, what else can I do to make my documentation better? And I'm looking at him as he's talking to me, and I'm thinking, this guy is so good with his documentation. What else? I mean, am I gonna have to like really dig? And I was like, well, I mean, your stuff is really good. And he's like, well, I just would like just some more communication. I said, so, I said, I know that I've told you before if you had any questions. He's like, well, but it's different on email. And I remember him saying that now. He said it's different when you're on email. And right then I knew this guy does not like email. And so I was like, okay. So I was like, that's okay, that's fine. I said, sir, I said, I apologize for not being more communicative with you. I said, so I will make it a point to make sure that I come around a lot more and start talking to you. And I will start looking for things that you can improve on your documentation. I said, because I personally used to think that maybe nobody wanted to hear anything that I had to say, that I would be like bothering you or like in your way. He's like, you're never in my way, Blue. You're never bothering me. He's like, if I can do something better, please let me know. So I said, okay. So this is when all of this started. All of this good communication started. And we have that incredible knack of being able to, like, and he says it all the time too. He says, as us as doctors, we communicate differently. And then you as a medical coders, you guys communicate differently. It's not the same. But what's so good is that we can communicate. I mean, like, I understand him and he understands me because we make an effort to try to understand and be able to communicate. And I noticed that after, when I had classes and things like that, like I would say something in the meeting and he would repeat it, and then you would see this aha moment with a lot of the doctors, because he would say it differently than I did, but saying the same thing. So this helps with communication. It helped other providers to understand it. It helped me to learn how to better explain things, because like I said, doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, PAs, they all communicate differently from the coder. Okay, coder is completely different. And a lot of people will say, you coders, they all talk in a different language. The thing to combat that, where people get confused and they get overwhelmed and they just don't want to listen after a while, is to learn better, more effective communication techniques. And that's why I say I'm going to show those pictures of the books that I have from the Arbinger Institute, because it is about taking yourself out of the equation. Now, had I thought about that before and been like, okay, I'm going to take myself out of the equation, which I sort of did when I went directly to Dr. X and asked him, what is the issue? What is going on? When I had did that, unknowingly, I had taken myself out of the situation and was trying to resolve it. But I had that human reaction of being upset, like, really, somebody's complaining about me? Like, who's complaining about me? Like, seriously, when I've gone and tried to communicate with you, but I wasn't doing that in a way that was effective for him. So it's just like, okay, it's learning about how to communicate with each person on an individual basis that is going to help them. Because obviously we all don't learn the same way. Some people are visual learners, some people learn by hearing it, some people learn by being hands-on, and some people learn by reading books. So you really do have to learn how to effectively communicate with people, because it's going to take several different approaches sometimes to be able to do that. But the whole goal is to be able to try and to attempt to do it. Because if you don't, and then you're just sort of sitting back, and you're not communicating with your provider, or perhaps you get like scared off because they snapped at you and they got mad, it is going to happen. And you will have times when they snap at you and it's going to hurt your feelings. I mean, I have 2 PAs that did that to me, and I was not happy when it happened, but I had to step back and say, okay, something's going on, which there was. Something else is going on that has nothing to do with me, and I just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the end result was they ended up doing what I asked them to do anyway, which was fine, and which was what made it better for me when I thought about it later. And of course, we've all made up, and everything is fine and hunky-dory and things like that. And they do respect me, and I respect them. Just like I respect Dr. X for still working with me and for communicating very well with me, and being a help to other providers when they don't quite understand why this medical coder needs all of this stuff. So promoting communication and talking things out when you don't understand something, even if you yourself as a medical coder don't understand something that's written down, go, and that's a good time to have an excuse to talk to them as well. Because there have been times when I have seen something and it's been documented, and I'm like, what the heck is this? Like, I'm trying to look it up online, I'm trying to look it up in a book, and it's just not making any sense. And I know that there are other people that I cannot go to ask these questions, so I will go to certain providers and ask them, like, can you break this down? Can you explain this to me? Because I know this means this and this means this, but this other thing doesn't make sense. And so having that is just a really good, like, an icebreaker into saying, hey, I need help. Because it's not about pride, and that gets in the way of a lot of good relationships a lot of times. Is, well, I don't want to ask a question because I don't want to look stupid. That's pride. And pride will get you not very far a lot of times. And yes, sometimes, the ego does get bruised a little bit, and, we don't want to have to admit that we don't know something. I get it. But there are alternatives and ways of figuring things out. But having a lack of communication is not an excuse for that, So if sometimes you just have to put your ego aside. There's going to be people out there, other coders, other people that are going to know more than you. I mean, it depends on experience. It depends on dedication, motivation. What is your own personal motivation for trying to get into medical coding or being a medical coder and making yourself better? Because, like I said before, there are medical coders that just kind of want to stay stuck in the same thing because they're very confident in whatever clinic that is, and they don't want to try anything else. I think that for a medical coder is bad because it promotes like stagnation. You don't want to ever get stagnant. You want to be able to expose your brain to all of these different clinics and expose, your experience level to a lot of different people. And being more open to communication is so huge in that. But you have to show that you are willing to be open for communication. So a couple of weeks ago, I had really slowed down a lot on my podiatry and orthopedic clinic providers, because I was trying to concentrate more on the pulmonary clinic, because I had left them alone for a little while, and then it turns out, as these error reports were coming out, that pulmonary had some errors to take care of. So I was really diving deep into working with them and trying to get them back on track. But then all of a sudden, as I'm doing this, I'm working a couple weeks into this, I start getting errors that pop up from orthopedics. And I'm like, okay, guys, what's going on here? So I marched over there and I said, hello, good morning. And they're like, oh, hello, good morning. I said, I have been neglecting you guys. Do you have any questions while I'm here? Because all of a sudden, people are starting to fall off. And they go, no, we're okay. And then I got, oh, yes, I do have a question. Okay, good. This is good. And, well, I'm glad that you came over because I was curious about this, X, Y, and Z. Good. This promotes communication. So that was my thing of, okay, I know now that I need to make sure that I kind of stay on them in order to make sure that we know that we're all okay and there's no falling off, because I need everybody to maintain their levels. And I know it seems like I'm kind of jumping from subject to subject, but this is something that I really want to point out. There are hospitals that get shut down. There are hospitals that get shut down because they're not making enough money for whatever reason, okay? And a lot of times that has to do with the billing, with the coding, and making sure that everything is, all these providers are getting all their credit like they should. Sometimes they don't get all the credit like they should. Sometimes they are missing a lot of things where they could have gotten more money, but because the coder either did not catch it or the coder has not trained the provider in order to recognize it, then they lose a lot of money and then hospitals end up getting shut down. So that's why it's very important that the role of the coder, I think sometimes is not as promoted as it should be. What we do is incredibly important. This is why I tell people, I stress this all the time. You have to have good reading comprehension. You have to be willing to study. You have to communicate effectively. Now, yes, we deal with alpha personalities, and it is sometimes very difficult to deal with these alpha personalities, especially for these alpha personalities that have to listen to somebody who has a certification. And a lot of times, a lot of us only have a high school diploma or a GED. Now, while there's nothing wrong with that, as long as the person is making the effort to learn more, it should be well respected and well balanced on both ends, but sometimes it's not. So this is why I say, in order to arm yourself and be as effective as you possibly can, that studying has to be part of it. And ongoing studying has to be part of it. Good communication skills has to be part of it. And if you happen to, let's say, if you have a very thick accent, this is something that you have to work on. You have to work on clear and effective speaking voice. Your tone needs to be as up there too, because sometimes people, they talk very low and they can't hear, and that's aggravating sometimes for some providers. And some people are their vocabulary is not quite as polished. You never want to be cursing. You never want to say, yes. You want to be able to be clear. You need to have a clear speaking voice, especially when you go to providers, because that is a complaint that I have heard before, that the provider does not understand the coder, so they do not want to listen. So again, if you have a thick accent, that is something that you should consider working on. Now, there's nothing wrong with accents. I'm just saying, if you want to be more effective with communication, that needs to be made more clear. Okay. Also, learning how to shake hands and always being around now, or being available. Okay. I do this in two ways. I am very fortunate that I am embedded in the clinic. So, walking down to the break room is no big deal for me, or I'll say good morning, hello, whenever I pass a surgeon or a PA or a nurse practitioner. I will say hello, good morning. And so that way they know that I'm there and I'm available. And sometimes I'll stop them and say, hey, how you been? Or you been doing all right? How's your documentation going? And if they're not my provider, I'll still ask them, how's your documentation going? Well, I haven't heard anything from my coder, so I guess it's okay. All right, well, I'll check in with your coder, make sure that everything's okay. Do I have to do that? No. Am I sticking my neck out when I do it? Of course. But watch what happens. So I will often go back to the coder and say, hey, how's so-and-so doing? oh, his documentation is a little weird. And then he says this. Okay, and so then I'll explain it. Oh, that's what that means. That is communicating with your coworkers. Because again, it's not about me. It's about making sure that these things are open. There's open lines of communication, because if the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing, we've got a problem. Okay? So that's why I say it's very important. And I do these things as respectfully as I can. I always tell the other coders, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure you got everything okay, they know and they understand. I don't usually have any problems with it. There are some coders that have an issue with it, but I think it goes back to a more of an ego issue, because I certainly am not trying to insult anyone. And I do have one coder that did come to me because she said, look, Blue, I know that you work with injuries all the time. Can you help me with this? Because I don't quite understand how to do this. So I worked with her, and now she's a whiz. I mean, she is a complete whiz. She knows, and she can effectively explain it. So again, it's going back to having that open communication. All of the coders know that I'm available for help as well. And, the supervisors know that I do that. I mean, to me, there's no issue with it. They don't answer to me, and that's fine. I'm not saying, oh, you guys got to, no. I'm saying that I do this because as coworkers, as fellow coders, we should be willing to communicate with each other. And I always have a resource to back up my arguments. So this has helped other coders to be able to know how to argue things as well, because they've learned how to have their resources ready when they're going for an argument, as far as like an audit or something. So again, it's all about communication. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I could talk about this stuff all day. Communication is so important. But like I said, I have to get ready, and I will be posting some pictures later. So I will talk to y'all in a little bit. But if you are a medical coder, a medical coding student, somebody curious about the fascinating world of medical coding, a provider or a nurse, I invite you to like and subscribe and follow me on my journey in medical coding. And if this video has helped you, I hope that you will like and thumbs up, because it really does help me. I really do appreciate it. Be sure to check out my Instagram for just pictures there. Alrighty, I will see y'all in the next video. Bye!